saying here that I think the biblical God, does occasionally intervene to change the motivational structure. As a matter of fact, as a Calvinist, I believe that every true conversion is a change of the, fallen, sinful human nature to change my motivational structure, so that, God made me willing to, come to Christ. I mean, I don't want to get into the Calvinist-Arminian debate there, but I think even classical Arminians, admit that, okay, they're not Pelagians. You're not a Pelagian, I hope, so that the Spirit of God, the grace of God, or some external agency here can actually change the internal motivational structure of the human agent. I assume you're not a Pelagian.
We're semi-Augustinian.
Right, I'm still not clear.
Let me try, what's not clear?
Why are you not, what makes you not a determinist? It seems to me you are a determinist. I mean, compatibilists are generally...
No, I think that as a person made in the image and likeness of God, God does delegate an enormous range of human choice and human freedom.
Okay,
especially, now, as a Calvinist, and here again, we're not debating that issue, but as a Calvinist, I believe that bringing me from spiritual death to spiritual life, Ephesians 2 and so forth here, I believe that was a unilateral choice of God. And that upon regeneration, I recover a degree of psychological, moral, and theological freedom that I didn't have prior to that state. But even as an unregenerate person, I had the choice whether or not to pay my income taxes to come to this debate tonight or whatnot here. So I would make a distinction between relative and absolute freedom, or natural freedom, and theological, spiritual freedom, and whatnot.
So you are a libertarian. It's just that
no, I'm not a libertarian. Well, not in the sense that he is. No.
Let's move on here, Michael.
Professor Davis, thank you for choosing to come and to be here.
Glad to be here. I chose to be here of my own free will. And I think God knew that I would be here.
Well, you answered my question. No, not really. I would like to hear you talk a little bit about two passages, both of which you alluded to.
Okay.
One, because I'm still working on it, in my head myself. You mentioned Jesus in Gethsemane, and I would love to hear your take on the actual prayers we have in the Synoptic Gospels. Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. That's a short one and easy one. I got a second one from Galatians, so I'm going to put these two together. I want to say thank you for the way you talked about freedom there. I think that's an area where we who call ourselves open theists really need to do more work. And I think Paul's language there about freedom as the freedom to serve one another in love is very, very powerful. And I know that John resonated with that as well. My question, I guess, or I'd like to hear you respond back to this. I think it's also important to see that Paul is making an appeal to his readers there. He says, in Christ you are free, and here's the kind of freedom you have. And he also says, and so don't use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh, but rather serve one another in love. In other words, there is, in fact, sort of these maybe the two different kinds of freedom that John was talking about. So I guess I want to come back and at least defend, in terms of the context of that passage, this other notion of an agency that can be directed in a different way. But I'd like to hear you talk about both of those.
Okay, well, let me take a shot. I'm not sure I've fully understood your question. They're both very good. But to go back to the notion of freedom first, then go back to the Garden of Gethsemane and Jesus' struggle there, which I think was quite real. But again, I'm becoming convinced that open theism is flawed with respect to its view of human freedom. And my argument would be that it's a notion of human freedom that does not take radically and seriously enough who human persons are. Okay? Because I would like to argue that human beings made in the image and likeness of God are by their very created nature relational beings, and that my humanity and human freedom has got to be a subset of our notion of who a human person is. Okay, if our notion of human freedom is inconsistent with the ontological reality of the human person, the project's not going to work. I'm saying that as a Christian here, my ontology of the person, okay, is going to be Trinitarian, and that my true personhood is only realized in relationship to God and ultimately in relationship to Jesus Christ, okay, and that true personhood is personhood in relationship, where love is given and received. That is true personhood. That is true love. And the paradigm there is, of course, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit in both the economic and the eternal Trinity. Now, where is this going? I think the flaw in libertarian freedom is that it has a notion of freedom which is not relational, it's not sufficiently theological, it's not sufficiently Trinitarian, because it wants to define the freedom of the human person, well, basically by saying that the human individual basically defines themselves, see? I'm going to define myself. I mean, freedom is so important that the essential definition of what it means to be a human person is to have this libertarian freedom, to choose X or not X, okay, to choose A or B, okay, in every circumstance. See, it's a non-relational, non-theological, non-Trinitarian view of human freedom, which even Dr. Sanders admits doesn't last into eternity. He has to give it up then. See, and if you have to give it up in the final state, which is more present than the present here, there's something wrong with that notion. So, no, freedom is the ability to make a choice which is consistent with the ontological reality, okay, with which I was created. You know, I was created to know the love of God the Father in communion with the Son in the power of the Holy Spirit. That's the only Christian context for defining the human person and a legitimate notion of human freedom. The alternative is what I would say I would call it a teenager's view of freedom.
Yeah. The point would be, I do want to hear you talk about Jesus, but...
Right, I will come back to you. Right, I haven't forgotten.
The fact that Paul appeals to the Galatians to exercise that freedom in that way.
Freedom in relationship,
yeah,
right.
I mean, the point would be, I guess we're free, if you will, not to do that.
Right, well, in other words, from Paul's point of view, the freedom to make a sinful choice is really a violation of genuine freedom, not its fulfillment. See? Now back to Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, I think Jesus was saying there, I think the emotional, psychological, introspective experience was real and not pathetic. Okay, it was a real struggle. I think Jesus was saying here, Father, I want to fulfill my vocation to be the Redeemer of mankind here. If there's any other way I can fulfill that purpose, in a non-sinful way without going to the cross, please let me know, okay? So I think that was a genuine conversation. I also make a distinction between the human consciousness of Jesus, okay, and the infinite, knowledge of the Logos, okay, which I consider to be following Cyril of Alexandria, the true fundamental ontological basis of his human personality. I think there were times when Jesus was not fully in touch with all of the unlimited knowledge which existed, in the second person of the Trinity, to which he was hypostatically united from the time of his incarnation, will be forever, my judgment here. But that was not available to him. Okay, so in other words, I make a distinction between the psychological awareness of Jesus as to his human personality and the ontological reality of the God-man.
I saw John kind of shaking his head like maybe you weren't characterizing his position the way he would like. John, do you want to get on that?
Well, a couple of things. One, in terms of libertarian freedom, I didn't belabor the point, and then even if I got in risk, I just say, here's the literature on libertarian freedom. This has been so widely discussed. So I just, Peter Van Inwagen, W.S. Anglin, there's lots of excellent work on what libertarian freedom is. And it's not like we're just out there as Lone Ranger individuals, just little monads, totally out of relation to everyone else. That's not how libertarian freedom works. It only works as individuals, and we only know each other. We only learn to know anything in relation to one another. So we're agreeing on that. And going back to the distinction between formal and material freedom, and whether or not we're Pelagian.